Introduction and beginning of Exile in Dapitan. The steamer Cebu, which brought Rizal to Dapitan, carried a letter from Father Pablo Pastels to Father Antonio Obac. In this letter, Father Pastels informed Father Obac that Rizal could live at the parish convent on the following conditions: that Rizal publicly retract his errors concerning religion and make statements that were clearly pro-Spanish and against revolution; that he perform the churchy rites and make a general confession of his past life; that henceforth he conducts himself in an exemplary manner as a Spanish subject and a man of religion. Rizal, on his part, admired the kind, generous Spanish captain. As evidence of this esteem, he wrote a poem, a Don Ricardo Carnicero, on August 26, 1892, on the occasion of Captain's birthday. Wins in Manila Lottery. On September 21, 1892, the sleepy town of Dapitan burst in hectic excitement. The mail boat, Butuan, was approaching the town, with colored pennants flying in the sea breezes. Now, Butuan is a mail boat which brought the news about Rizal's winning in the lottery. The mail boat, Butuan, brought no Spanish officials but the happy tidings that the lottery ticket number 9736, jointly owned by the Captain Carnicero, Dr. Rizal, and Francisco Equilor, won the second prize of 20,000 pesos in the government-owned Manila lottery. Rizal's share of the winning lottery ticket: 20,000 pesos is the lottery prize. 6,200 pesos of it was given to Rizal. 2,000 pesos of his share he gave to his father, and 200 pesos to Basa in Hong Kong. The rest he invested through purchasing agricultural lands from the coast of Talisay, about a kilometer away from Dapitan. 3 pesetas amount were Rizal allotted for lottery tickets every month. Well, Rizal was a lottery addict. Rizal Pastel's debate on religion. The debate started when Pastel sent Rizal a book by Sarda along with an advice that Rizal should desist from his mahaderas, or foolishness, in viewing religion from the perspective of individual judgment and self-esteem. The debate can be read in 4 letters. Rizal was bitter against the friars because they commit abuses under the cloak of religion. Father Pastels tried to bring back to Catholicism Rizal by telling him that human intelligence is limited, thus he needs the guidance of God. Behind the debate, Pastels and Rizal were friends as evidently pictured when, number 1, Pastels gave Rizal a copy of Imitación de Cristo by Father Thomas A. Kempis. Rizal gave Pastels a bust of St. Paul, which he had made Rizal continued to hear Mass and celebrate religious events. Rizal challenges a Frenchman to a duel. While Rizal was still debating with Father Pastels, by means of exchange of letters, he became involved in a quarrel with a French acquaintance in Dapitan. This man purchased many logs. Some of the logs were of poor quality. Rizal flared up in anger and confronted Lordet and challenged him for a duel. "My friend, you have not a Chinaman's chance in a fight with Rizal on a field of honor. Rizal is an expert in martial arts, particularly in fencing and pistol shooting." Captain Carnicero. Lordet then apologizes. Rizal and Father Sanchez. Father Pastels, aside from his personal efforts to persuade Rizal to discard his errors of religion, instructed 2 Jesuits in Mindanao, Father Obac and Father Jose Viclara, to try their best to bring back Rizal within the Catholic fold. Furthermore, he assigned Father Francisco de Paula Sanchez. Father Sanchez was the only Spanish priest to defend Rizal's Noli Me Tangere in public. They argued theologically in a friendly manner, but all the efforts of Sanchez were in vain. Father Sanchez enjoyed the latter's company, and he even assisted Rizal in beautifying the town plaza. On his birthday, Rizal gave him a precious birthday gift, a manuscript entitled Estudios sobre la Lengua Tagala, Studies on the Tagalog Language.
So now let's talk about idyllic life in Dapitan. In Dapitan, Rizal had an exemplary life, idyllic in serenity. So since August 1893, members of his family took turns in visiting him in order to assuage his loneliness in the isolated outpost of Spanish power in the Moroland. Among his family members who visited Rizal were his mother, his sisters Trinidad, Maria, and Narcisa, his nephews Chidosio, Stanislao, and Prudencio. So Rizal built a house by the seashore of Talisay, surrounded by fruit trees, a school for boys, and a hospital for his patients. And in December 19, 1893, Rizal wrote to Blumentritt for describing his life in the Pita. Rizal's encounter with the friar spy. During the early days of November 1893, Rizal was living peacefully and happily at his house in Talisay, which is a kilometer away from the Dapitan. His mother, sisters, and nephews were then living with them. His blissful life was then suddenly jolted by a strange incident involving a spy of the friars. This spy was Pablo Mercado. Pablo Mercado is an assumed name of the spy who visited Rizal at his house and pretended to be a relative by showing a photo of Rizal and a pair of buttons with the initials PM, which means Pablo Mercado, as evidence of kinship. So kinship is the relationship between members of the same family. In the course of their conversation, the spy offered to be Rizal's courier of letters for the patriots in Manila. So Rizal, as a man of prudence and keen perception, became suspicious and wanted to throw the spy outside. But considering his values and late hour of the night, he offered the spy to spend the night at his house, and the next day he sent the spy away. After the departure of his bogus relative, Rizal attended to his daily chores, forgetting the incident of the previous night. Later, he learned that the spy was still in Dapitan and telling people that he was a beloved relative of Dr. Rizal. So Rizal loses his temper and decided to report the impostor to Captain Juan Sitges, a successor of Carnicero of May 4, 1893 as commandant of Dapitan. Without much ado, Sitges ordered Pablo Mercado's arrest and told Anastasio Adriatico to investigate him immediately. So, based on all the available documentary sources, the incident of the secret mission of Pablo Mercado in Dapitan was not an assassination attempt on Rizal. It was merely an espionage plot concocted by the friars. As physician in Dapitan, Rizal practiced medicine in Dapitan. He had many patients, but most of them were poor, so that he even gave them free medicine. To his friend in Hong Kong, Dr. Marquez, he wrote, "Here the people are so poor that I have even to give medicine gratis." He had, however, some rich patients who paid him handsomely for his surgical skill. So in August 1893, his mother and sister Maria arrived in Dapitan and lived with him for a year and a half. It is here when Rizal operated his mother's right eye. Though the operation was successful, his mother and a wound infection after ignoring Rizal's instruction of not removing the bandages. Thus, Rizal told Hidalgo, his brother-in-law, "Now I understand very well why a physician should not treat the members of his family." Fortunately, the infection was immediately treated. Rizal's fame as a physician, particularly as an eye specialist, spread far and wide. He had many patients came from Luzon, Bohol, Cebu, Panay, Negros, and Mindanao, and even from Hong Kong. Don Ignacio Tomarong paid him 3,000 pesos. An Englishman paid him 500. Don Florencio Azacaraga paid him a cargo of sugar. That is where Rizal became interested in the local medicine and prescribed medical plans to his poor patients. Water system for the Dapitan. Rizal held the title of expert surveyor, or also called Pareto Agrimensor, which he obtained from Ateneo. Rizal applied his engineering knowledge by constructing a system of waterworks to furnish clean water to the townspeople. Modern engineers marveled how Rizal could have built such a system of waterworks, for he had inadequate tools and meager materials, and his finances were very limited. Without any aid from the government, he succeeded in giving a good water system to the people. Mr. H. F. Cameron, an American engineer who praised Rizal for his engineering ingenuity. Community projects for the Pitan. When Rizal arrived in the Pitan, he decided to improve it to the best of his God-given talents and to awaken the civic consciousness of its people. He wrote to Father Pastels, "I want to do all that I can in this town." Aside from constructing the town's first water system, he spent many months draining the marshes in order to get rid of malaria that infested the Pitan. As a European trained physician, he knew that malaria is spread by the mosquitoes which thrive in swampy places. The 500 pesos which an English patient paid him was used by him to equip the town with its lighting system. The lighting system consisted of coconut oil lamps placed in the dark streets of the Pitan. Electric lighting was unknown then in the Philippines, and it was not until 1894 when Manila saw the first electric light. Another community project of Rizal was the beautification of the Pitan. With the help of his farmer Gisit, 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 Gisit. With the help with the help of his farmer Gisit, teacher and friend, Father Sanchez, he remodeled the town plaza in order to enhance its beauty. He jokingly remarked that he would make it nicely so that it could rival the best in Europe. In front of the church, Rizal and Father Sanchez made a huge relief map of Mindanao out of earth, stones, and grass. This map still adorns the town plaza of Dapitan.
Now, let us proceed on Rizal as teacher. Ever since boyhood, Rizal knew the value of good education. During his travels abroad, he observed the educational system of modern nations. He himself planned to establish a modern college in Hong Kong for Filipino boys so that he could train them in modern pedagogical concepts, which were then unknown in the Philippines. His exile into Dapitan gave him the opportunity to put into practice his educational ideas. During the 1883, he established a school which existed until the end of his exile in July 1896. It began with 3 pupils, and in the course of time, the enrollment increased to 16 and then later on turned to 21 students. In his letter to Blumentritt on March 13, Rizal said that he had 16 pupils in his school and that these pupils did not pay any tuition. Instead, he made them work in his garden, fields, and construction projects in the community. Rizal taught his boys reading, writing, languages such as Spanish and English, geography, history, mathematics such as arithmetic and geometry, industrial work, nature study, morals, and gymnastics. He also trained them how to collect specimens of plants and animals, to love work, and to behave like men. Formal classes were conducted between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. Rizal, as the teacher, sat on a hammock, while the pupils sat on a long bamboo bench. On one day, the lessons were conducted in Spanish, and on the next day in English. As in the Ateneo, the best pupil was called the Emperor, and he sat at the head of the bench, while the poorest pupil occupied the end of the bench. During the recess of the pupils, they built fires in the garden to drive away the insects, pruned the fruit trees, and manured the soil. While outside the class hours, Rizal encouraged them to play games in order to strengthen their bodies. They had gymnastics, boxing, wrestling, stone throwing, swimming, arnis, which is a native fencing, and boating. Him to Talisay. Rizal conducted his school at his home in Talisay, near Dapitan, where he had his farm and hospital. His favorite rendezvous with his boys was under a Talisay tree, after which the place was named. In honor of Talisay, he wrote a poem entitled Hymno at Talisay for his pupil, Contributions to Science. Rizal found Mindanao a rich virgin field of collecting specimens. With his baroto or sailboat, and accompanied by his pupils, they explored the jungles and coasts, seeking specimens of insects, birds, snakes, lizards, frogs, shells, and plants. He sent these specimens to the Museum of Europe, especially the Dresden Museum. In payment for these valuable specimens, the European scientists sent him scientific books and surgical instruments. During his 4-year exile in Dapitan, Rizal built up a rich collection of conchology, which consisted of 346 shells representing 203 species. He discovered some rare specimens which were named in his honor by the scientist. Among these were Draco rizali, which is a flying dragon, Apogonia rizali, a small beetle, and Rhacophorus rizali, which is a rare frog. Rizal also conducted anthropological, ethnographical, archaeological, geological, and geographical studies, as revealed by his voluminous correspondence with his scientist friends in Europe. There was no limit to his scientific versatility. Linguistic studies. Rizal, a born linguist, continued his studies of languages. In Dapitan, he learned the Visayan, Subanum, and Malay languages. He wrote a Tagalog grammar, made a comparative study of the Visayan and Malayan languages, and studied the Visayan and Subanum languages. On April 5, 1896, which is his last year of exile in Dapitan, he wrote to Blumentritt, "I know already Visayan, and I speak it quite well. It is necessary, however, to know other dialects of the Philippines." By this time, Rizal could rank with the world's great linguists. He knew 22 languages, which is as follows: Tagalog, Ilocano, Visayan, Subanun, Spanish, Latin, Greek, English, French, German, Arabic, Malay, Hebrew, Sanskrit, Dutch, Catalan, Italian, Chinese, Japanese, Portuguese, Swedish, and artistic works in Dapitan. Rizal continued his artistic pursuits in Dapitan. He contributed his painting skill to the Sisters of Charity, who were preparing the sanctuary of the Holy Virgin in their private chapel. For the sake of economy, the head of the image was procured from abroad, the vestments concealing all the rest of the figure except the feet, which rested upon a globe encircled by a snake and whose mouth is an apple, were made by the sisters. Rizal modeled the right foot of the image, the apple, and the serpent's head. He also designed the exquisite curtain, which was painted in oil by an artist sister under his direction. Rizal also made sketches of persons and things that attracted him in Dapitan. For instance, he drew the 3 rare species of animal life, which are the dragon, the frog, and the beetle, which he had discovered. He also had sketches of the numerous fishes he caught in Dapitan waters. One day, in 1894, some of his pupils secretly went to Dapitan in a boat from Talisay. A puppy of Syria, which is Rizal's dog, tried to follow and was devoured by a crocodile. Rizal reprimanded them, telling them that had they not disobeyed his advice not to go to town without his permission, the puppy would not have died and the mother dog would have been spared the sorrow of losing an offspring. To stress the moral of the incident, he modeled a statuette representing the mother dog killing the crocodile, by way of avenging her lost puppy. and he called this statuette the Mother's Revenge. Other sculptural works of Rizal in Dapitan were a bust of Father Guerico, which is one of his Ateneo professors, a statue of a girl called the Dapitan Girl, which is a wood carving of Josephine Bracken, his wife, and a bust of Saint Paul, which he gave to Father Pastor. Rizal as farmer. In Dapitan, Rizal devoted much of his time to agriculture. He bought 16 hectares of land in Talisay, where he built his home, school, and hospital, and planted cacao, coffee, sugarcane, coconuts, and fruit trees. He wrote to his sister Trinidad, "My land is half an hour from the sea. It is very poetic and very picturesque. If you and our parents come, I will build a big house we can all live in." Later, he acquired more lands until his total holdings reached 70 hectares, containing 6,000 hemp plants, 1,000 coconut trees, and numerous fruit trees, sugarcane, corn, coffee, and cacao. On his farms, Rizal introduced modern methods of agriculture which he had observed in Europe and America. His pupils helped him in the daily farm labor. He encouraged the Dapitan farmers to discard their primitive system of tillage and adopt to the modern agricultural methods. He imported agricultural machinery from the United States. Rizal dreamed of establishing an agricultural colony in the city of Ponot near Sindagan Bay, where there was plenty of water and good port facilities. He believed that this place would be ideal to raise cacao, coffee, coconuts, and cattle. He invited his relatives and friends, especially those in Calamba, to come to his projected agricultural colony. He wrote to Hidalgo, his brother-in-law, "We will establish a new Calamba." But unfortunately, this colony did not materialize, like his previous Borneo colonization, because he could not get the support of the government. Rizal as businessman. Aside from farming, Rizal engaged in business. In partnership with a Dapitan merchant, Ramon Carreon, he made profitable business ventures in fishing, copra, and hemp industries. He invited his relatives, particularly Saturnina and Hidalgo, to come to Mindanao, for there is vast and ample field for business in the island. He particularly told Saturnina that in Dapitan, she could profitably engage in the textile, jewelry, and hemp business. In a letter to Hidalgo, dated January 19, 1893, he expressed his plan to improve the fishing industry of Dapitan. He said that the town has a good beach like Calamba, and there is abundant fish in the sea. However, the fishing folks, using primitive methods of fishing, were able only to catch small fishes. Accordingly, he instructed Hidalgo to help him buy a big net for trawl fishing, or pukutan, and to send him 2 good Calamba fishermen who could teach the Dapitan folks better methods of fishing. The most profitable business venture of Rizal in Dapitan was in the hemp industry. At one time, he shipped 150 bales of hemp to a foreign firm in Manila at huge profit for himself and his business partner. He purchased hemp in Dapitan at 7 pesos and 4 reales per pickle and sold it in Manila at 10 pesos and 4 reales, giving him a profit of 3 pesos per pickle. In his letter to Blumentritt on July 31, 1884, he said, "To kill time and to help also the people of this town, I have become a merchant. I buy abaca and ship it to Manila. Luck was with me this month. I made a profit of 200 pesos in one stroke." On May 14, 1893, Rizal formed a business partnership with Ramon Carreon in lime manufacturing. Their lime burner had a monthly capacity of more than 400 bags of lime. To break the Chinese monopoly on business in Dapitan, Rizal organized on January 1, 1895, the Cooperative Association of Dapitan Farmers. According to its constitution, which he had drafted, its purposes were to improve the farm products, obtain better outlets for them, collect funds for their purchases, and help the producers and workers by establishing a store wherein they can buy prime commodities at moderate prices.
The next topic would be about Rizal's inventive ability. One of Rizal's accomplishments during his lifetime was that he was also able to become an inventor. In 1887, while practicing medicine in Calamba, he was able to invent a cigarette lighter which he has sent as a gift to Blumentritt. It is called sulpukan. So sulpukan is made of wood and its mechanism is based on the principle of compressed air. During his exile in Dapitan, he was also able to invent a machine for making bricks, and this machine could manufacture about 6,000 bricks daily. Now I will be showing an image of a sulpukan. So this is how a sulpukan looks like, and as I've stated earlier, its mechanism is based on the principle of compressed air. So the internet and the book shows different spellings for sulpukan. So in the book it says sulpukan, while in this image it shows that it is sulpakan, but we'll be following what is in the book. The next topic would be about my retreat. So in February 1895, Doña Chudora, who is Rizal's mother, with her eyesight fully restored, she returned to Manila. And seeing how busy Rizal is, she was afraid that Rizal might already be neglecting the muses. So she requested Rizal to write a poetry. As a response, Rizal wrote Miritero on October 22, 1895, relating his serene life as an exile in Dapitan. So, Miritero is a poem that talks about the peaceful and calming experience that Rizal feels when he is surrounded by nature. This poem also reflects Rizal's deep appreciation of nature and his longing to escape from the stresses of modern life. Next, we'll be discussing about Jose Rizal and Josephine Bracken. So the death of Leonora Rivera, which was on August 28, 1893, left a poignant void in Rizal's heart. In his loneliness, he met Josephine Bracken. So Josephine Bracken is an Irish girl born in Hong Kong on October 3, 1876. James Bracken and Elizabeth Jane McBride were Josephine's parents, who are both Irish in citizenship. When Josephine's mother died due to childbirth, Mr. George Topher was the man who adopted Josephine. Mr. Topher later on became blind, so he sought for an ophthalmic specialist, and this is how Josephine Bracken and Jose Rizal met. Manuela Orlac is a Filipina companion who accompanied Josephine Bracken to Dapitan. Rizal and Josephine Bracken decided to get married, but Father Obak refused to marry them without the permission of Bishop of Cebu. Hearing of the planned marriage and unable to endure the thought of losing Josephine, Mr. Topher tried to commit suicide by cutting off his throat with a razor, but Rizal was able to prevent this. To avoid a tragedy, Josephine accompanied Mr. Topher, and Mr. Topher returned to Hong Kong alone, while Josephine stayed with the Rizals in Manila. Having no priests to marry them, Rizal and Josephine married themselves before the eyes of God. To avoid a tragedy, Josephine accompanied Mr. Topher, and Mr. Topher returned to Hong Kong alone, while Josephine stayed with the Rizals in Manila. Later on, she returned to Dapitan. Having no priests to marry them, Rizal and Josephine married themselves before the eyes of God. The two were happy, for they were expecting for a baby. However, Rizal played a prank on Josephine, making her give birth to an 8-month-old baby boy. The baby lived for only 3 hours, and he was named Francisco in honor of Rizal's father. Rizal also wrote a poem for Josephine which was titled Josephine, Josephine. Rizal volunteers as a military doctor in Cuba. Months before the Katipunan contacted him, Rizal had offered his services as military doctor in Cuba. There was a shortage of physicians to minister the needs of the Spanish troops and the Cuban people. It was Blumentritt who told him of the deplorable health situation in Cuba. Cuba was under revolution and raging yellow fever epidemic. Adhering to Blumentritt's advice, Rizal wrote to Governor General Ramon Blanco offering his services as military doctor. In July 1, 1896, when Jose Rizal least expected it, Governor Blanco notified Rizal of the acceptance of the offer, and the notification came along of acquiring first pass for Manila from the politico-military commander of Dapitan. The Song of the Traveler. Rizal was so glad from the news that he received from the Malacanang for the approval of his offer to become a military doctor in Cuba. Once more, he was going to travel to Europe and then to Cuba. It was with this joyous thought of resuming his travels that he wrote his heartwarming poem called El Canto del Viajero. The next part would be about Rizal's departure from Dapitan. On the morning of July 31, 1896, his last day in Dapitan, Rizal busily packed his things. He was scheduled to leave the town on board the España, which was sailing back to Manila. He had sold his lands and other things he owned to his friend, mostly natives of Dapitan. At 5:30 in the afternoon, he and 8 other companions embarked on the steamer. His 8 companions were Josephine, Narcisa, his sister, Angelica, daughter of Narcisa, his 3 nephews, Mauricio, Stanislao, and Chudosio, and Mr. and Mrs. Sonico. Almost all the Dapitan folks, young and old, were at the shore to see the departure of their beloved doctor. The pupils of Rizal cried, for they could not accompany their dear teacher. Captain Carnicero, in full regalia of a commandant's uniform, was on hand to say goodbye to his prisoner, whom he had come to admire and respect. The town brass band played the music of the farewell ceremony. At midnight of Friday, July 31, 1896, the steamer departed for Manila. The Dapitan folk shouted, "Adios, Dr. Rizal," and threw their hats and handkerchiefs in the air. Captain Carnicero saluted his departing friend, and as the steamer left the town, the brass band played the sad music of Chopin's Farewell March. Rizal was in the upper deck with tears in his eyes. He raised his hand in farewell to the kind and hospitable people of Dapitan, saying, "Adios, Dapitan." He gazed at the crowded shore for the last time. His heart was filled with sorrow. When he could no longer see the dim shoreline, he turned sadly into his cabin. He wrote in his diary, "I have been in that district for 4 years, 13 days, and a few hours."